Hello nerds, today we are looking at Berserk, a manga released in 1989. I have talked about Berserk before, however, I intend for this retrospective to be the definitive series I have on my favorite anime manga of all time. And not only that, but I will finally read Berserk to its latest chapter, something I've been putting off for 2 years for one reason or another. As of now, February 2026, I've read all the way to around the middle of the Conviction arc. But right now, I'm going to go from the first Black Swordsman chapter all the way to the latest Fantasia chapter, and I'm bringing you along with me. Berserk is the piece of media that means the most to me, not counting video games. Out of all of the amazing stories I have seen, none can compare to the impact Berserk has had on me, and even now, when I haven't read it for months, I still think about it nearly daily. It is truly something special to me. Berserk follows Guts, a lone swordsman on a quest for revenge against opponents far greater and more malicious than himself, but is much more than just that. It's a story that covers some of the darkest realities humans can face, and how one can overcome and persevere through the endless darkness the world can offer. Berserk was written and illustrated by the late great Kentaro Miura, as a project that began when he was 18, working as an assistant for George Morikawa, who is known for writing and illustrating the boxing manga Hajime no Ippo, and this project would continue after Miura's passing in the hands of his closest friend Koji Mori. This will be my most passionate retrospective, if it's not obvious already, so enjoy me gushing a lot. Now, with the background out of the way, let's see what Berserk is all about. Berserk wastes no time in showing you the edge the story brings, as the literal first panel of the manga shows the main character, who we learn is the Black Swordsman named Guts, having sex with a girl that turned into a horrific demon, which he kills with his metal arm cannon. This is quite shocking, and could be quite the turnoff for some people, unfortunately. This introduction can give off the wrong first impression about Berserk, and some might even write off the series as just a graphic edgelord series after seeing this first scene. On top of all of that, once you actually learn who this is, this opening doesn't make a whole lot of sense character-wise. Guts, as you'll come to learn later in the series, would not be one to have sex with a demon, even if it was to secure the kill. Anyways, luckily for us and unknowingly Guts, we meet a little fairy named Puck, who becomes the comic relief of this arc, although there is more to him than just that. The main deal of the Black Swordsman arc and Guts' life at this point is that he is seeking revenge on demons or apostles who cursed him with the brand of sacrifice, an ominous symbol on his neck that attracts demonkind to him and makes his life a living hell. However, the reason why Guts has survived this living hell is because of his unrelenting determination and strength to survive. He is armed with a sword so massive you could call it a heap of raw iron. He has a prosthetic arm that turns into a cannon and a crossbow, and it is with these weapons that he is able to take down the seemingly immortal apostles, though not without major injuries to himself. And because his life is a living hell, Guts is a major asshole in this arc. He is unfazed by death, torture, and pain in general. He is a lone mercenary on his mission for revenge, and he wants to stay that way, as he is constantly pushing Puck away throughout the arc. It is clear that Guts does not trust anyone. He sees Puck and other people weaker than him as ants waiting to be crushed. He doesn't want anyone close to him because he knows what his life is. He knows that those who get caught up with him end up getting killed. And we see that when he hitches a ride with a priest and his daughter. They are both ultimately killed by possessed skeletons that Guts' brand attracts. And while I said Guts is unfazed by death, seeing these innocent people get killed just for being around him is enough to shake him. Although Guts will be the last person to acknowledge if he was phased, as he hides behind a psychopathic mask that supposedly doesn't care in order to deny the pain. However, it is increasingly difficult for Guts to deny the pain and bury his feelings because of Puck. Puck, being a fairy, has unique powers. His wings produce fairy dust which heals, something Guts desperately needs a lot. But more importantly, he can sense feelings, and when Guts senses what Guts is feeling, oh boy, it's enough to hurt Puck himself. Rage, sadness, fear, and more, all caused by a darkness that Puck doesn't understand since Guts is not one to open up about his past. So, even though Guts is who he is, Puck follows him. Why? Well, he's intrigued by Guts and the pain-filled life he is enduring, and he wants to help him any way he can. although what little bond they have is constantly trying to be severed by Guts, of course. However, Puck is about as persistent in his partnership with Guts as Guts is in his own vengeful mission. Alright, so we got the dark brooding Guts and the bright innocent Puck together in this dark fantasy medieval world on a quest for revenge that involves slaying extremely grotesque demons called apostles. Where does this lead us? Well, we see Guts take down a snake apostle, fight some skeletons, and fight countless knights, all with relative ease. But the main plot of the Black Swordsman Arc begins when we meet two characters. First, we meet Vargas, a mutilated physician who shares Guts' hunger for revenge against the apostles, specifically one in particular we'll get to. Guts sees Vargas, like I previously mentioned, as a worthless ant since he is so weak and disgusting. Despite seeing him like this, even Guts can't fully deny the similarities between them. Vargas also possesses a very important item that Guts is unfortunately familiar with, a behelit. Guts explains that behelids are essentially keys that summon demons from another dimension, but these are no ordinary demons. They are known as the 5 members of the God Hand, and they have apparently manipulated the dark side of human history since ancient times. But even with that explanation, we still have a whole host of questions surrounding the dark fantasy elements of the story. We barely know anything about the apostles of the God Hand, but that changes when we meet the Count. The Count is another apostle who rules over a castle town and has a distinct disdain for heretics. It is also a trend that these castle towns are ruled by apostles pretending to be humans. But the Count is the apostle that Vargas wants dead for torturing him and eating his whole family in front of him for trying to escape. Yeah, saying these apostles are evil is an understatement. They are demons in every sense of the word. However, when it comes to the Count, it's more complicated than that. Anyways, after Guts and Puck meet Vargas, the Count sends a soldier named Zondark infused with his power to kill Guts, and it's in this fight that Guts' skills truly shine as he uses his massive sword to deflect each of the axe swings Zondark whips at him with his tentacle arm. Both Puck and the reader witness in this moment the master swordsman that Guts is. They manage to escape and part ways, but not before Guts takes the behelit for himself, and Puck gives Vargas some hopeful words, basically saying he should live for the future instead of avenging the past. A wise little elf Puck is, in some regard, but too ignorant to understand the realities of the world he lives in. Vargas gets captured and executed, Puck gets captured for trying to save Vargas, and Guts is once again disturbed by a death. No matter how hard he tries, Guts cannot escape the parallels between him, Vargas, and anyone else who has fallen victims to the apostles. He will fight the Count, but not for those who are already dead, but he will do it for himself. Though, if you know the context behind Guts' motivations for revenge, him being so dismissive and hostile towards the other victims of the apostles doesn't seem right, given what happened to those closest to him. And also, he would have more than enough motivation to kill the Count himself, given that this is not the first time they have met. Anyways, while Vargas and the Count are the main and more important characters in this arc in my opinion, besides Guts and Puck, there's another character of note, Theresia, the Count's daughter. She has been stuck in a room for 7 years due to the overprotective nature of the Count, who seems to actually love and care for her, so that's nice I guess. Theresia tells Puck, who the Count gave to her as a gift, that her mother was sacrificed by pagans, which explains the Count's hatred for heretics and overprotection for his daughter. According to Theresia, the Count was a much nicer man before his wife died, but suddenly a switch flipped and he became inhuman. Of course, Theresia doesn't know how literal her belief is, yet. Meanwhile, Guts makes his way to the Count, slaying Zondark for good along with another army of knights. Seeing the commotion, Puck leaves to go help Guts, but not before giving Theresia hope by saying he'll free her from her room after this is all over. A dream that was so out of reach for her, she stopped thinking about it. Alright, now it's time for the big climax, Guts versus the Count, and this will be the hardest battle for Guts that we've seen by far. The Count's sheer size and strength and his disgusting slug apostle form are just too much for Guts to handle, as he can barely land hits on the Count while he gets ragdolled around the Count's boss room. The Count mid-battle recognizes the brand on Guts' neck and immediately understands why he's fighting and how much pain he has gone through. Again, doesn't make sense since these two have met before, but this was written before that was known, so not a big deal writing-wise. The Count sees this now as him putting Guts out of his misery and sending him to his final destination, in hell. Why hell? Because of the brand, of course. If you get branded, your destiny is hell, and there's nothing you can do about it. According to the Count, divine providence cannot be thwarted by man's efforts, so Guts is not only fighting against demons, but against destiny itself. Puck, seeing Guts on death's doorstep, decides to destroy the Count with facts and logic, aka sensing his feelings and motivations through his powers, along with the context Theresia told him, saying he ran away from himself and his humanity to become a monster in order to numb the pain he felt as a human. This analysis actually impresses the Count, but as soon as Puck tries to steal the Behelit, the Count isn't having it. But you know what the Count will be having? Heartbreak, as Theresia freed herself from her room due to the destruction of the castle from the fight, and she just so happened to walk in on her father being a literal monster. Theresia is obviously petrified, which enrages the Count towards Puck and Guts, who is still alive and willing to die to end the Count, and using the insane tactic of taking Theresia hostage to lower the Count's guard in order to blast and slice him in a manner that is completely inhuman itself. There is no way Guts doesn't have some superhuman strength and durability from the brand or something. Afterwards, Guts satisfies his wrath boner by mutilating the Count in front of his daughter and Puck. I said Guts is a major asshole in this arc, but to the apostles, he is completely unhinged. The feelings Puck sensed within Guts back in the cell are being expressed completely in this moment. However, the Count's blood trickling down to the Behelit along with his pleas for life turns this battle into something far greater than anyone anticipated, as we are finally introduced to the God Hand. The God Hand as a whole are shown to be beings that are beyond comprehension and that far surpass any regular apostle in power. Guts' wrath is seemingly directed against all apostles, which is correct. However, his ultimate target is one particular member of the God Hand, Femto, or as Guts calls him, Griffith. The rage and determination Guts creates in response to seeing Griffith is enough to allow him to take a swing at Griffith, even with all his injuries plus the brand of sacrifice reacting violently in the presence of the God Hand. Griffith is, without a doubt, responsible for Guts being who he is at this point due to an unknown betrayal. An interesting statement the God Hand member Slan makes is that she would have loved it if Guts became one of them, but it seems he cannot because that is not his destiny. But besides that, the God Hand doesn't believe in free handouts. The Count will have to sacrifice something he truly loves, the last thing that ties him to his humanity, his daughter, Theresia. And despite all the Count's evilness, he cannot do it. Like I said, the Count is more complicated than just being a completely evil piece of shit. And we learn even more when the God Hand reveals the truth of what happened to Theresia's mother. So basically, how do I put this? The Count found his wife taking part in a massive pagan orgy which sent him into a blind rage, massacring everyone except for his wife, and when he couldn't bring himself to kill her, he tried to kill himself, but not before his Behelit awakened. The God Hand intervened by promising him a life without sorrow or despair. All he had to do was sacrifice his wife, and this time, he gave in. And now he must do the same thing again to his daughter in order to keep living. But before that, we get a flashback to a young, unmutilated Guts and a young human Griffith. They are shown to be friends on the battlefield, and Griffith in particular tells Guts the deep questions he has about his life and ambition. What is his role and destiny in the world? A lot of talk about destiny, which is starting to become a reoccurring theme in the story. Anyways, back to the Count. If he can't sacrifice Theresia, then he'll be whisked away into a vortex of Dark Souls. This is the hell the Count was talking about before with Guts. So, can he do it? Is the Count's humanity beyond saving? Or is the little bit of humanity that remains within his heart for his daughter enough to sacrifice himself instead? Turns out, it's the latter. The Count, looking at the last remaining piece of the stable family he once had, is enough for himself to put his daughter's life over his own. And as a result, he is dragged into the Hell Vortex by an army of corpses, including Vargas. They also attempt to take Guts due to the brand, showing that Hell is indeed his destiny as long as he bears the brand. Luckily, Guts is able to fend them off with one last attack at Griffith before the God Hand leave, and everyone returns to the ruined castle. Before this fateful night, Theresia had always longed to leave her room and see the outside world for what it is. But now, she has seen enough of the outside world, and she wants to go back to her room now. Yeah, can't really blame her after everything she just went through. What a batshit first impression of the world. She even wishes she were dead, and Guts bluntly encourages her to fulfill her wish to Puck's anger. In reality, he just wants Theresia to have complete control over her life and what she does with it, a freedom he himself does not possess. However, as she was preparing to slit her wrist, the floor beneath her fell, and Guts quickly saved her with his sword. Ouch. So despite just moments before telling Theresia to kill herself, he saves her right as she was doing the deed. And the look on Guts' face after he saves her says everything. Actually, after Theresia threatens to kill Guts one day for what he caused, Guts gives us one last expression before the arc ends, and this is the most important panel in the Black Swordsman arc. It's Guts crying. It is Guts finally breaking. Even if it's just a little, it's a break. The Black Swordsman arc, or I should say, Guts in the Black Swordsman arc, portrays himself as a violent, ruthless, and careless man who only cares about himself and his quest for revenge. Which, to a certain extent, is true, but in the end, it's mainly just a mask, and this panel of Guts confirms it for good. He does care. He is affected by all this darkness around him. No matter how hard he tries to block it out and tough it through, this life he was forced into and continues to pursue is painful. Unbelievably painful. But as he is seen in the very last panel of the Black Swordsman arc, he continues to keep going. He continues to keep moving forward despite all the pain he creates for himself and for those around him. He wants to keep living, yes, in order to enact revenge on the Apostles and Griffith, but also for himself. Guts crying at the end of this arc shows that he is sane enough to still understand the difference between the life he leads now versus the life he once had. And maybe, just maybe, he believes somewhere deep within his heart that he can go back to that life. A life with less pain. Puck witnessing Guts breaking is the same as us witnessing Guts breaking. Just like the reader at this point, Puck wants to see where Guts goes from here, but unlike the reader, he has the ability to help him along the way. And that is where this arc leaves us. A much shorter and simpler arc in comparison to the rest of the arcs in Berserk. But if I had to describe this arc in a single word in relation to the world and characters of Berserk, I would say this arc is rich. Rich in both information and mystery. We learn so much about Guts while still being in the dark about his past. We learn so much about the dark fantasy elements of Berserk while still being clueless about plenty of things relating to the Apostles and Godhand. Vargas succeeded in his role of being a mirror to Guts. The Count succeeded in being a compelling villain that isn't completely evil. He still is extremely evil, don't get me wrong, but compared to other Apostles, he is a goddamn saint. And finally, we circle back to Puck. Oh, Puck. Puck remains the simple character he was at the beginning, but his role in the arc is not to be understated. He is a literal light in the sea of darkness that is the Black Swordsman arc, not only as the comic relief for the reader, but as a bringer of hope, as we see him bring hope, even if it's just a little, to the people around him. If he wasn't around, perhaps Guts doesn't cry at the end of this arc. But thankfully, he is, and will continue to be by Guts' side as an annoying little pest, but also as a beacon of what could be. An underrated arc that was many of our introductions to the world of Berserk, and I believe it did more than enough to immerse us and make us care about the world and the characters that inhabit it. Anyways, hope you enjoy the next 101 chapters of flashbacks. Wait, what? Yeah. And as always, thanks for watching.